I mean, I don't think when you're a kid you have a sense of a career, do you? It's just kind of who do you love, what do you love doing, what do you want to do? And I'm just desperate to be a ballet dancer. I remember coming here to the Royal Opera House actually and seeing Nureyev and Antoinette Sibley doing Swan Lake. I'd probably be about 7 or 8 years old. It still sticks in my mind as one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But of course, A, I was no good, and B, I grew to about 5'11" at the age of 12, so that was kind of out really. I think there is something really fundamental about just knowing your employees. You know, I think we need to look more perhaps at the football manager model or the captain of the army model. There's something about really knowing them as individuals, knowing what they like, what they don't like, knowing what frightens them, knowing what gets them up in the morning, knowing when they need an arm around the shoulder, when they need a kick up the backside. You know, really knowing them as human beings. And I think too often as we've got bigger, we've become more global, we've resorted to seeing employees as a kind of homogenous lump as the staff. And how can you really get people excited about things if you're not really tapping into who they are? The reason I talked about niceness, which clearly is a slightly banal phrase, and when we think about nice people we tend not to think about natural leaders. But when we look at what we need in the future, we need leaders who are going to enable collaboration, they're going to need to build partnerships, they're going to need to not just be the one who knows it all and does it all, but actually creates an environment where very, very strong-minded individuals can flourish. That means a low ego personality type, because actually it's not about them being centre stage, it's about them enabling and creating for others. So when I talked about niceness, I really do mean that we do need people who are not the kind of alpha male, narcissist psycho that we've all had the misfortune to work for in the past, but to actually look at a new type of leader. And I don't think it is actually that much more complicated to build trust on a grand scale as opposed to a small business, because technology is an enabler as opposed to a barrier to building human relationships, is largely untouched. How many chief execs use social media to listen and have conversations as opposed to broadcasting? How many of them use technology to just simply speak to rather than enable a conversation? So I think technology enables us to do things, but also leadership and the culture of an organisation is made up from hundreds of individual leaders. And if each of those are changing the way that they behave in some small way every day, then you can change the culture relatively quickly. Well, disruptive HR is born of a frustration with my own profession, and I've been guilty of doing some of this stuff myself, is that actually HR feels very tired. It feels as if we're trying to shoehorn individuals into 20th century processes that just don't work, the annual appraisal, the annual engagement survey. And actually we need to put some real understanding of human behaviour back in. And yes, that's looking at some of the neuroscience and the great work that's coming out from there, but it's also really going back to some human instincts about what we know as parents and as friends and as colleagues about things that work. I think it's a really important question about have we got the right people in HR. I do worry about it. I think there are some fantastically talented, clever, insightful, hard-working people in HR, but there aren't enough. And what I hear from the chief execs and chairmen that I know is that HR isn't setting the agenda around the future of talent. HR isn't at the top table in terms of its gravitas and its commerciality. HR isn't seen as being a profession that the highly talented people really want to go into, and of course that's a massive concern. So I think we need to think differently. I think we need to look at what we can learn from other colleagues around the board table, what we can learn from marketing and strategy and finance, and have the humility to say, actually, you'll do this bit better than I can or that my team can, and we need to bring better people in from other functions. Let's not be precious about it. It doesn't have to be done by HR, but it has to be done.